We left off on the last lecture with this critical moment in Islamic history where, if you remember, the Prophet Muhammad has this revelation. He starts to preach his message to his community, and it's mostly rejected, mostly because his tribe is a relatively wealthy, powerful tribe. They have a lot to lose on this religious message that one of their members is kind of spouting off, that they don't totally believe in, and that they see as threatening and they see as offensive, possibly to many of their business clients. So they're pushed out. They say, Muhammad, leave. It's time to go. They're not going to kill him or execute him or anything of that nature, but they say it's time to go. You can't keep this up. So the Prophet Muhammad, this is in Mecca that this is all happening, decides, okay, I'm leaving and I'm going to this place called Medina. Medina means the city, so it's renamed Medina later in history. At the time, it's known as Yathrib. And this moment, 622, when this happens, is significant, if you remember, because this is the first time when his followers are tested. Those who believe in his message now have to give something up for this message. And those who do are seen as the beginning of the Ummah, the beginning of the Islamic community. And so this happens. And while he's in Medina, he's there for 8 or 9 years. And this is where he really rises to power. So he has many of his revelations earlier. He has many of his revelations while in Medina. But he takes on these greater, more significant roles in Medina, because Medina is a smaller city. It has a significant Jewish population and other minority traditions as well. But Muhammad kind of rises to power when in Medina and is able to eventually come back and take over all of Mecca. So not just that tribe of Quraysh, but the entirety of Mecca. But he's only able to do so because of his successful time in Medina. So he takes on these new roles. He's gaining more and more followers. People believe in his message. Remember, there's a significant Jewish population here, and much of Muhammad's message incorporates many of the Jewish myths. He's talking about Abraham. He's talking about a new message from the God of Abraham. And this is very familiar to many of these people, and they take well to it, some of them. Some leave, some are converted, some convert out of just for practical reasons. He becomes a social reformer. He becomes a political leader and also a military ruler. So on all three fronts, he's quite successful. As a social reformer, remember, he continues to receive revelations. So from the Muslim perspective, this would be God telling him how to reform society. From the religious studies position, this is him having a new message and attributing it possibly to God, or us not really even being concerned with where they come from, but let's look at historically how these norms and social mores develop. One thing he preaches is religious tolerance. He says time and time again, we as Muslims, as those who submit to God, remember the word Muslim means to submit to God, we accept Jews and we accept Christians as quote-unquote people of the book. You believe in the same God, you worship the same God, so we accept you as our own. We also hope that you read and take into consideration this new message, this final seal of the prophet's message that is being delivered at this time. He also encourages religious literacy, kind of like Martin Luther in the Protestant Reformation, or even Paul in some ways. He says, you individuals, you men and women who consider yourselves religious adherents to this tradition, you're responsible for your own religious life. You're not going to look to a pope or some kind of intermediary to do your work for you, to speak to God on your behalf. Rather, you need to understand God on your own, develop your own relationship with God. So he says we all must become more religiously literate. We must become closer to God ourselves. Unlike early Catholicism, where there is this priest-like figure, or the Pope even, who does these works on their own, and for a period of time, in the medieval period especially, many of the adherents to Catholicism didn't even understand the language in which their service was being held in. So if the service was held in Latin, you might speak German or French or English or some other language that you're totally unable to form your own opinions or your own interpretations with the scripture itself. Muhammad says, no, you must learn the scripture. This is why there's this continued emphasis. Learn some Arabic because you want to read this in its original version. You're responsible for your own religious fate. And then also, the Prophet Muhammad preached more rights for women. So he granted women the right to divorce when they did not have this right beforehand. He gave women the right to inheritance. Prior to the Prophet Muhammad in pre-Islamic Arabia, women could not inherit money from either their father or husbands. They were not allowed to own property. After the Prophet Muhammad came and rose to power, he granted inheritance, he granted property rights, and he outlaws infanticide. So there was, unfortunately, a common practice where female babies were killed for the preference of male babies to kind of carry on many of these rights that are granted to men. He also preached many times that men and women are viewed as equals in the eyes of God. If we look at Surah 33, Ayat 35 in the Quran, we have here a passage, remember this is coming from God, depicting what society ought to look like, and this is a demonstration of the equality of men and women, at least in the eyes of God. It says, quote, for Muslim men and women, for believing men and women, for true men and women, for men and women who are patient and constant, for men and women who humble themselves, for men and women who give in charity, for men and women who fast and deny themselves, for men and women who guard their chastity, and for men and women who engage much in God's praise. For them, God has prepared forgiveness and great reward. So the idea here is there's this explicit effort to place men and women on equal footing in the eyes of God. Now, this is not to deny the existence of multiple other passages that do not demonstrate equality between genders. There are passages that say while men and women are seen equally in the eyes of God, they have different roles in society, and women are often, for the most part, placed in lower hierarchical status to men. They do have an inferior role to men in many ways, and in some societies this continues to be the case, but in many modern Muslim Islamic societies we get much more equality between the genders. So, at this point, Muhammad has begun to really grow as a political figure, as a military leader. The Ummah, his Islamic community, the community of Muslims, is growing as well, and he's becoming powerful, and he wants to return to Mecca. Remember, he was driven out of Mecca, but Mecca was the place that God first came to speak to him. Mecca is, in his eyes, the home of God. So he feels like his message belongs first and foremost back in Mecca. So what happens is a series of conflicts ensue once he becomes more powerful. They being Muhammad and his followers, begin raiding caravans. This is a regular, typical practice at the time. This is nothing new, where caravans are essentially series of cars with goods, or carts with goods that are used to be, are traveled to be traded. So Muhammad and his people would come and raid these to acquire the resources and to gain more power. So this happens for a series of years until this Battle of Badr in 624. So he's been in Mecca for a few years now, for 2 years now, and he's gaining power. And they plan this raid on this Meccan caravan to acquire more goods. But the Meccans get wind of it, and the Meccans prepare for this, expecting that this is going to happen, and are planning to fight back. So 900 Meccans are ready to fight these early Muslims from Medina, while only 300 Muslims are there to fight. However, Muhammad and his people still manage to win this battle. So there's this religious interpretation that it must have been that God was on our side. God used his angels to help defeat the Meccans. There's also a very practical or political interpretation, which is, hey, Muhammad's a very savvy military leader. He's a great political leader. His stock is rising. He's becoming more and more powerful. So this leads to more converts. You want to be on the side of the guy who's doing well, who's rising, not the one who's being defeated and deflating in many ways. So he returns to Mecca, and remember this temple in the background, this is called the Kaaba. This is that cube-like temple that we'll talk about a little more. He returns to Mecca, and eventually after a series of battles, Muhammad and his followers take over Mecca successfully. So by 630, they return to Mecca. Mecca is now under the control of Muhammad and the Ummah, his early Muslim community. He frees the remaining Meccans, many of whom remain and convert. This is becoming more and more popular to follow Muhammad and his message. And this is important. All of the idols that are in that Kaaba, that cube temple that you see in the background there, they're removed. Remember, it contained all the idols of all of the travelers and Bedouins and locals, their idols that they worship to. Muhammad says, no, we need to get rid of all these. He clears it out and rededicates this Kaaba to God. This is similar to this practice we saw in Judaism, where there's a rededication. This is the story of the Maccabees, of Judas Maccabeus, where once the temple was recovered, it was rededicated to God. In a very similar sense, Muhammad is rededicating this temple to get rid of the plurality of the gods, to exterminate the plurality of the gods, and to focus on the oneness of God. So this temple is dedicated to God again, and this is seen as restoring that ancient covenant that God once had with Abraham, and then through Moses, and then through Jesus, and now through Muhammad. And this is the final covenant. This is the seal of the prophets, the seal of these covenants as well. And then Muhammad, because he's a human being, dies in 632 at the age of 62. So this is important that you guys understand this family tree. It gets a little complicated, but you will need to go back and just study this to know who all of these players are. It becomes important in the question of succession. So at the center, of course, we have the Prophet Muhammad, and he marries, we've already talked about her, Khadijah, this powerful businesswoman who is intelligent, older than him, wealthy, and powerful. They marry. Abu Talib, if you remember, is Muhammad's uncle who raised him. So though he's his uncle, he also is like a father figure to Muhammad. Abu Talib has a son who's a bit younger than Muhammad. So Muhammad becomes very close to this person, and this person is pivotal in Islamic history and is really responsible for this Sunni-Shia divide. It's because of this figure that we have Sunnis and Shia Muslims today. This person is Ali. So Ali is Abu Talib's son, which makes him Muhammad's cousin. Though he's very much like a younger brother to him as well. They're raised in the same home. They have this very close, bonded relationship. Now, Muhammad and Khadijah also have a daughter. His daughter's name is Fatima. And the important thing here is Fatima marries Ali. Now, this might seem unusual or weird to our modern Western ears, but this, I assure you, is a very common practice at the time. There's nothing unusual about this. If anything, this demonstrates that Muhammad and Khadijah adore Ali to the extent that they see him as a suitable husband for their daughter. So this also makes Ali his son-in-law. So Ali is this person who's very, very close to the Prophet Muhammad. Now, Fatima and Ali have two sons who become important a little bit later. We'll talk about in Shia Islam. The first, Hassan, the second, Hussein. So we'll come back to them in a little bit. Muhammad and Khadijah have another daughter, Ruqayya, and Ruqayya marries this man named Uthman. Now, keep in mind here, in these, Ali and Uthman are in the same color, this, I don't know what color that is, beige or something. keep in mind when you see these names popping up in beige, these become the successors of Muhammad. And what we're trying to demonstrate here is that those who succeeded Muhammad were very close to him, knew him very well, were part of his extended family. So this is a movement that was very tight-knit, but grew very rapidly as well. So this makes Uthman his son-in-law. Now, Muhammad marries another woman named Aisha a bit later in life, and Aisha's father is Abu Bakr. So this makes Abu Bakr Muhammad's father-in-law. And then Muhammad marries another woman, Hafsa. This is also, might seem weird to our modern Western ears, but again, the plural marriages is very typical and normal of this society in this time, in this place. He marries another woman, Hafsa, and Hafsa's father's name is Umar, which makes Umar Muhammad's father-in-law. We see here Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali are all in this beige color here. These become the successors in that very order. Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and then Ali. So there's this question we just talked about. The Prophet Muhammad died in 632 CE. Who leads this community, this ummah that is growing, rapidly growing, now that the Prophet has died? Who succeeds the Prophet Muhammad? Well, the majority of people, the majority of Muslims, say the Prophet Muhammad left no clear instruction for succession. He didn't, before he died, say, this person should succeed. So, they understand this as we must choose who succeeds. Those who do succeed are called caliphs. They form the caliphate, or the kind of succession of rulers after Muhammad. And caliph comes from the Arabic word khalifa, which just means successor. So it's a political successor. These are not future prophets. Remember, Muhammad is the seal of the prophets, the final prophet. Their job is very much political, to lead the Islamic community. Now, I have up here the majority of people say that Muhammad left no clear instruction, but those who were, there was a faction of people who followed Muhammad, who were early Muslims, who said, no, that's not the case. Actually, Ali, who is obviously the closest to the Prophet, he is like his brother, he is his cousin, his son-in-law, he married the Prophet's daughter. He knows how to lead. He's young. He's around 29 or 30 at the time. But this is obviously someone very close to the Prophet Muhammad, and they say that there's this hadith, this tradition that that basically, or I should say this account or this report, that the Prophet Muhammad, before he died, at what was called the Pond of Qum, this place right outside of Mecca, had 75,000 to 150,000 of his followers around him, and he said something to the effect of, while putting his hand on the shoulder of Ali, when I'm gone and you need to look to someone to understand how to act and what to be like, look to Ali. Ali is an exemplar. Ali is a good Muslim man. This is the man that you look to. Now, the majority of Muslims are going to say, what becomes Sunni Muslims are going to say, yes, this happened, but this was not an indication that Ali should become the successor, the caliph, but rather, this is a good man who we should look to as an exemplar of how to live our own lives, that Ali is a good person, a good Muslim, but that's categorically different than being a caliph, which is a political successor, someone who is able to lead such a large group of people. Rather, the majority of Muslims who become Sunni Muslims say we should get together, convene, and decide who should become the next caliph, and they look to Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr, again, is Muhammad's father-in-law. They say he's older, he's very well respected, he was also very close to the Prophet. This seems like someone who would be capable of leading the Ummah, this large early Muslim community. So this is what begins the divide of Shia versus Sunni Islam. We're going to see there are also some theological differences that develop as a result of this early division, but there are clear divisions that take place early in Islamic history. So again, we have here Abu Bakr is decided upon to be the first caliph, while Ali has a faction of followers who say, no, Ali should have been the successor, and they continue to believe he should be the successor for many years. These caliphs who do succeed Muhammad are known as the Rashidun Caliphate, or the rightly guided caliphs. In order, Abu Bakr takes over, then Umar, then Uthman, and then eventually Ali gets his turn. He does take over, and he is the caliph for about 5 years. These are the closest companions of the Prophet, like I said, and the closest companions, a larger group than just these four, got together and they convened to choose the first caliph, and they chose Abu Bakr. They said Abu Bakr was one of the earliest converts. He's older, he's close to Muhammad, he's his father-in-law, he's well established. While he is 59 or 60 years old at the time, Ali's only 32 at this time. So many say he's too young to lead such a community. He doesn't have the life experience or the military or political savvy to do so. This party, though, becomes a distinct community. I just said this, but I'll repeat it here. The Shia Muslims become known as the party of Ali, the ones who support Ali and think Ali should take over, should succeed Prophet Muhammad in leading the community. So Abu Bakr does take over first. He only lives for about little over 2 years, but he's very effective in these 2 years. He's looking to expand this early Islamic empire, to take over new territory and to seek more converts. He's very militarily effective, and the trajectory of the Islamic empire has a very high arc. It is very quickly spreading at this time. Next, after Abu Bakr dies, we have Umar, who takes a different role. He looks at the quick, high trajectory of the spread of Islam and says, we need to retain our unity first and foremost. The larger we get, and the faster we grow, the more increased the threat of factions become. We don't want all of these factions. We already see one faction in our home of Mecca, a group of people who are supportive of Ali and are not supporting Abu Bakr or himself, Omar. So he's really trying to rein it in. Is not concerned with expanding further, but is more concerned with supporting the Islamic community itself and retaining a sense of unity. After 10 years, it goes the other direction once again. Uthman takes over. Remember, he is the son-in-law of the Prophet Muhammad, married his daughter Ruqayya. And he says, we need to further expand, and he does very effectively. He expands beyond Arabic lands. So those who do not speak Arabic or come from Arab cultures are now becoming converted to Islam. So as they're quickly spreading, Uthman appoints his nephew, Muawiyah, as the governor of Syria. So when empires become so large that you cannot oversee them effectively from a central place, you begin to appoint governors, people who have the similar power as you, but over far away, or lands that are on the periphery of the empire. So Uthman does this. However, he's he's accused of nepotism for this, that you're appointing your own family without really subjecting it to the Islamic community that was closest to the Prophet, who picks the caliphs. Subject your appointment of governor to us, and we will decide as a whole. This doesn't happen. He just appoints his nephew, Muawiyah. And he's eventually actually murdered by those rebelling, saying, you're not going through the correct avenues. However, Muawiyah retains this position as governor, and Muawiyah we're going to come back to in a minute here. Finally, after Uthman dies, and he's killed, remember, he's killed by one of his own, Ali takes over for the next 5 years. Now, there's a controversy that brews here. Uthman is killed, and the majority of the Muslim community support these rightly guided caliphs of Abu Bakr, then Umar, then Uthman. When he's killed and Ali takes over, there's a lot of pressure to seek justice for the death of Uthman, which Ali is accused of not doing fully, which causes another faction or another moment of tension and an event, which we'll talk about quickly here. So again, the family tree, just to remind you how each of these rightly guided caliphs are related to the Prophet Muhammad, and that these are very close members of Muhammad's family. So Ali takes over in 656, and these factions are becoming more distinct. The supporters of Uthman now want justice. He was killed, they want justice, so they go to battle. And in this battle, Aisha, one of Prophet Muhammad's wives, remember the Prophet Muhammad is dead at this point, but Aisha is still alive, she leads this battle in support of these rightly guided caliphs of Abu Bakr, Umar, and then especially Uthman, and says, we have not found justice, you have not sought justice for the death of Uthman, our leader. So she actually goes to battle against Ali. We have two groups within this early Islamic Empire, these two distinct factions fighting each other. This is called Battle of the Camel because she actually takes, she's on camelback while fighting. She ends up losing. She's not killed in the battle, but she loses. And Ali retains his hold on the caliphate. Meanwhile, Muawiyah. Remember, Muawiyah is Uthman's nephew. So Muawiyah is also upset that Uthman's death, this assassination of Uthman, was never sought out. There was no justice in response to this death, and he opposes Ali for this reason. He takes his troops, Muawiyah, into Mecca and opposes Ali, and they almost come to battle. However, beforehand, Muawiyah asks if they can arbitrate instead. Let's talk this out, let's negotiate and make some agreements rather than fight. We don't want Muslims killing Muslims. We are all serving God through the message that our Prophet Muhammad has given us. So let us talk this out instead. And Ali accepts this. Now, this is problematic for some, a minority, not a huge faction, but a very small group of people called Kharijites. These are Ali's followers that see this as a sign of weakness in Ali. They say you should not have ceded to his request, you should not have accepted his request of arbitration. So this small group of people, Ali's own people, these Kharijites, rebel against him, and a Kharijite man actually assassinates Ali in 661. After Ali dies, Muawiyah takes over and claims the caliphate, and this is the end of this Rashidun caliphate, and this is the beginning of what's called the Umayyad dynasty, which lasts from 661 to, I believe, 750 CE, so for almost 100 years. We're not going to talk about the Umayyad dynasty, but I do want you to understand this section here, where Muawiyah was appointed by Uthman. He came down to seek justice for his uncle's death. He proposed arbitration. Ali accepted that. This was seen as a scene of weakness to a small minority, a small faction of Ali's own people who are called Kharijites, and this Kharijite man kills Ali, and as a result, Muawiyah claims the caliphate. So here we have a map. In this darker red region, we see the expansion of the Islamic Empire while the Prophet Muhammad is alive. So pretty much sweeps the entire Arabian Peninsula. Now remember, the Arabian Peninsula is not a highly coveted piece of land. It's quite arid. It's removed geographically from a lot of the trade routes and a lot of where most of these empires are seeking to take over. So this is relatively quick and relatively easy. Now, once the Prophet Muhammad dies and this Rashidun Caliphate takes over, we talked about especially Abu Bakr and Uthman really pushing to expand their caliphate, to expand the Islamic Empire, and this extends all the way west through modern-day Egypt and part of Libya, and then more importantly up through Iraq, Jordan, Syria, Turkey, and also pretty much all of modern-day Iran, and even further east into Central Asia. Then, once Muawiyah takes over and ushers in this new dynasty, the Umayyad dynasty, we see even further expansion. So we get this early Islamic empire that lasts, that is spread all the way through Spain and Portugal, even up through modern-day France, all the way east through Central Asia here. And this really leaves a lasting world impression, and Islam becomes a major world tradition within just 100 years, if not less, within 100 years of the Prophet Muhammad, his original message. So unlike Christianity, which took 400 years to spark this major world movement through Constantine and Theodosius, Islam takes on a much quicker and higher trajectory.